Vin Future Prize, a new global science and technology prize for humanity from Vietnam. One Vin Future Grand Prize of $3 million. 3 additional special Vin Future prizes valued at $500,000 each. Vin Future Prize honors science and technology work that creates or has a high potential to create meaningful change in the everyday lives of millions of people. Join us to make a change for a better future.
Welcome to the second InnovaTalk webinar of 2023 presented by the Vin Future Foundation. My name is Tao Chen, and as always, it is my pleasure to be your moderator for today. We are so happy to have you joining us today, as we're sure that you also share our fascination with the topic of ChatGPT, a phenomenon that has taken the world by storm. Now, as we keep on discussing this topic in today's webinar, we can't help but wonder what the continued impact of artificial intelligence, as well as large language models, how will it shape our world as we embark on an industrial revolution? These are some of the questions that we hope to answer in today's webinar. Now, without further ado, please allow me to introduce to you our panelists for today. Dr. Shuidong Huang, Technical Fellow and Azure AI Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft and member of the Vin Future Prize Council. He is the chair for today's webinar. Dr. Vinton Cerf, Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. He is also a laureate of the 2022 Vin Future Grand Prize. Dr. Jianfeng Gao, Distinguished Scientist and Vice President at Microsoft Research. And last, but definitely not least, representing the Vietnamese sci-tech community in AI research and applications, we have Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi, Chief Executive Officer at VinAI. Now, before we meet with our esteemed panelists for today's webinar, I would like to invite you all to keep watch for a short trailer that serves as a great introduction for today's webinar. Please take a look.
Artificial intelligence has truly revolutionized the way we work and is a game changer in many industries. One notable example of this is ChatGPT and OpenAI, which is a tipping point for AI. ChatGPT is a tool driven by AI technology that allows you to have human-like conversations. This generative AI is going to change education, regardless of their location or background. According to The Guardian, in just 2 months of operation, ChatGPT has gained 100 million users, a true testament to its popularity and effectiveness. Do you think you know what it takes to navigate in today's world? A world where AI is gradually changing the way we live? Join us for the latest InnovaTalk webinars, where we'll be discussing the fascinating topic of ChatGPT and beyond. Presented by the Vin Future Foundation, this event will delve into the phenomenon of ChatGPT and explore what lies beyond the impressive capabilities of large language models. We're pleased to present the chair for the webinar, Dr. Shuidong Huang, a true icon in the field of AI speech and language processing. Dr. Huang is the Technical Fellow and Azure AI Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft.
I think it's exciting time to see the large language model. ChatGPT is only one of many large language models available. It's steadily improving over time because of the progress of the quality. So that opened the door for many exciting new opportunities out there. We're just in the beginning of this industrial revolution. This is the active discussion and learning opportunity for all of us. Nobody has a recipe that can be just used broadly for everyone.
Joining Dr. Huang in this webinar is distinguished speaker Dr. Vinton Cerf, Vice President and Chief Evangelist of Google. Dr. Cerf is widely known as one of the fathers of the internet. He is also a laureate of the 2022 Vin Future Grand Prize. Dr. Vinton Cerf's large language models, erratic but intriguing tools presentation explores LLM's remarkable ability to generate relevant content and invent alternative facts. We're also pleased to present Dr. Jianfeng Gao, a distinguished scientist and Vice President of Microsoft Research. He is a veteran computer scientist, an IEE Fellow, and the current head of the Deep Learning Group at Microsoft Research. Dr. Gao's From LLM to Self-Improving AI presentation proposes augmenting LLMs with plug-and-play modules to fill the functional gap for mission-critical tasks. And finally, representing the Vietnamese sci-tech community is Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi, Chief Executive Officer of VinAI. He has worked at Google DeepMind, Adobe Research, and Nuance Natural Language Understanding Lab, and spent almost 10 years at the AI Center SRI International. For Murley Stanford Research Institute, get insights on LLMs, opportunities and challenges for low-resource languages abstract, with a focus on 22 low-resource languages like Vietnamese with at least 50 million first language speakers. How can we, as a society, evaluate the risk of various uses of LLMs so as to avoid harms? What are the chances for low-resource languages with little and underrepresented data available? Find your answers and tackle your concerns in the latest InnovaTalk.
Dr. Sui-Dong Huang, who will bring an extensive range of expertise as Technical Fellow and Azure AI Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft. Now, before we get to meet with him officially, I would like to take a moment to congratulate Dr. Huang on your remarkable 30-year journey at Microsoft. And also, as of last month, he became the official member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Huang, congratulations. We are so honored to have you as our chair for today. Now, I would like to pass the virtual stage to you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. It's a fantastic. We have really some world-class panelists like Vint, Jim Fong, to talk about what is ahead of us. Before we start, I want to just say a few words about the journey. IBM started the machine translation in the 50s. They struggled a little bit. Eventually, Fred Janelic and others found that the statistic-based approach for speech recognition was fairly effective. So the large language model at that time was n-gram. Depends how big you want to make this n. At that time, it was mostly trigram or 4-gram at the most. When Peter Brown from IBM Speech Research Group took this statistics-based approach to machine translation, that completely changed how machine translation was done. So we could actually see the effectiveness of the language model in comparison to the very traditional AI expert system around that time. So statistics-based method like large language model got more mature. Eventually, Jeff Hinton worked with Microsoft researcher, identified that deep neural nets could actually really outperform Gaussian mixture hidden Markov model. And then later, others identified the neural nets can be applied to language model as well. So once again, in machine translation, Google researchers published this self-attention is all you need. That is from machine translation. Once again, really the transformer changed everything from that point on. So the large language model started from IBM Speech Research Group, got into machine translation and IBM as well. Then from deep learning, we got a speech and translation really pushed the field moving forward. So today there are just tremendous computing resources available. There are really hundreds different kinds of large language models available. So we have the great opportunity to have 3 world-class experts to share their view, challenges, and the learning ahead of us. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to host this panel, to have this talk. So I pass the stage to Vint, and who needs no introduction. Yes, he's the father of internet and also the recipient of the Vint Future Grand Prize last year.
Well, thank you very, very much for a kind invitation. I don't consider myself an expert in artificial intelligence and certainly not in machine learning. So what you'll be getting from me are sort of lay observations based on my experiences with some of the large language models that I have interacted with. But I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking I'm expert. I will be listening closely to what the rest of you have to say, possibly in reaction to some of my observations. So the first thing that I would observe is that the large language models show the capacity to generate very well-formed text, whether they're trained in English or some other language. By the time you get a very, very large number of parameters associated with these systems, the quality of the text that's generated is quite good. And in fact, that causes us to confuse the output of the chatbots with an ordinary human being on the other end, because the quality of the language is so grammatically well formed. It also shows considerable ability, based on whatever preamble you give it, whatever prompt you give it, to produce relatively relevant content based on what it has been trained to absorb. It's important, I think, to mention, though, that some of the models, which are quite expensive to train, will have content that's only valid up to a certain date, after which they don't have any further training. And so we've seen cases where chatbots have had arguments about what year it is based on when their training was stopped. My guess is over time that we will have more continuous kinds of learning going on, so that the chatbots will be continuously improving the body of material from which they generate their output. The second thing that I experienced in interacting with some of these engines is their ability to essentially conflate factual material to produce misinformation. I don't think it's exactly intentional. I think it's a consequence of the statistical way in which the text is generated. Many of the training mechanisms that I'm familiar with have to do with filling in the blank. You give it text and you ask it to add the next piece that's missing. And it's rewarded, so to speak, if the next piece is considered good quality, at least grammatically, if not factually. I asked one chatbot to write an obituary for me. Now, I know that sounds kind of macabre, but I knew two things. First, that obituaries are a well-known format, and that it would have been learned by some of the large language models. And second, as you might imagine, there's a fair amount of information about me and my story found on the World Wide Web and presumably absorbed by the chatbots. So indeed, when I said, please write a 700-word obituary for Vint Cerf, an obituary form was created, and it said, we're very sorry to tell you that Dr. Cerf has passed away. And it proceeded, however, to provide some history of my life and contributions, and it got many things wrong. It gave me credit for things other people did, and it gave other people credit for the things I did. And then at the end, of course, in a typical obituary, it told about the members of the family who were left behind. It made up family members that I don't have. I have two brothers, but it invented a younger and an older sister. Of course, for all I know, it knows something that I don't know, but at least I couldn't corroborate that. So the thing which I worry about, of course, is how do we know when we're using these tools, whether we're getting correct information or we're getting conflated, even facts that have been chopped up. I don't know if you're familiar with the term word salad, but I meant there's a device that is sold in the United States called a salad shooter. It's a little device where you put a carrot in and it chops the carrot all up, and then it puts it into the salad bowl, and then you add the vegetables and toss it all and then deliver it. So if truth were a vegetable, what this thing does is chop up the truth into these little fragments, little tokens, and then it puts them together in arbitrary ways and then presents them to you. So that sounds potentially harmful, but there is a potential value in this. It might be that it would generate juxtapositions that we wouldn't think of. It might be that concepts might be conflated that turn out to cause us to think. And so there might be some real value coming out of this sort of generative process. But I think we need to be very thoughtful about what we get. The thing that I worry the most about is that we may be persuaded by the quality of the output that it is correct and accurate, because it looks good and it sounds good, but it could be wrong. And if we don't know anything about the topic we've asked about, we could accept as true and valuable something which is entirely made up. So I do worry about needing some method for constraining or controlling or creating guardrails or doing something. My Freudian interpretation of this is that what we have is an artificial id and maybe an artificial ego, but we don't have an artificial superego that will kind of oversee what's coming out of the chatbot and put some constraints on it. Maybe we need two chatbots, one that's doing the generative stuff and another one that's sitting on the top saying, wait a minute, you're going off the rails. We need to control the output. So that's where I am right now. Very curious to know how we can use these tools for constructive purposes and how do we inhibit their potentially harmful or hazardous behavior.
Our next speaker is Jianfeng Gao. He is a distinguished scientist and the VP of Microsoft Research, leading our deep learning group in Microsoft. So I will just pass the stage to Jianfeng. She has done a wide range of research from language to computer vision to speech. He was actually hired to work on language model when he joined Microsoft. So that was 20 or 25 years ago.
Let me share my screen. Because I have some presentation prepared. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna give some detailed examples to what Fent just mentioned. He mentioned there are a lot of problems of these large scale language models. One of them is hallucination, right? And made up things. So this is a very critical problem, because if we want to use these models for mission critical tasks, extremely harmful. So we need to deal with it. And today's talk, I'm gonna focus on how to build this so-called self-improving AI system based on large scale language models. Okay. So it is now generally agreed that the intelligence of an AI system should be measured by skill acquisition capability in a non-stationary setting where tasks are evolving over time and new tasks appear constantly, rather than its skill on a set of pre-designed tasks. Right. So there are two, I would say, complementary approach to AI or AGI in general. One is what I call this a specific to general approach. For example, by building larger scale language models. This is what OpenAI is taking, and it has been very successful so far. The other approach, I think, is more fundamental, is a general to specific approach by building self-improving AI systems. These systems try to augment large-scale language models with plug-and-play modules developed for real-world applications and that can improve and learn new skills for new tasks constantly. While the OpenAI is taking the first approach, I think the rest of the Microsoft, majority of Microsoft teams are taking the second approach by using OpenAI model as the base. Because we have a lot of applications, AI applications, and large amount of users, active users. Okay, so there are some fundamental issues of these large-scale language models we need to address before we can deploy them to real-world mission-critical tasks. First, these models tend to hallucinate due to its loss in coding of the raw knowledge. You can sometimes I just view these models as a compressed indexing of the entire world web. So because the encoding is lossy, of course, it causes some memory distortion, just like every one of us. The second, no matter how large these models are, they can never encode all the information needed for many applications, such as the news and news chat, right? Because news come out, new news come out every day. You cannot update the model constantly. And also some data sets, database knowledge graphs are not publicly available. So this model never seen this data. Third, the model cannot effectively improve itself for task-specific objectives. For example, for some tasks, we need hallucination probably is a good thing. For example, when we want to use the model for some creative work, right? Write a novel or use the DALL-E 2 to create some images. Or in this case, hallucination is the feature. But in other cases, information-seeking tasks, hallucination is a problem. So there are different ways to adjust these models, but by human means. But ideally, the model needs to be able to adjust itself based on the context. Okay. So we actually propose to develop this self-improving AI system to address these problems. First, we develop a set of plug-and-play modules to fill this so-called functional gap. Second, as these modules are available, and we equipped the system with the capability of improving itself using user interactions and automated feedbacks to make these existing modules more effective and reusable, and to discover new skills by composing these modules and create new modules. This slide just shows how these plug-and-play modules can work together with a frozen large-scale language model, because any change of the large-scale language model gotta be very expensive. So the ideal case is that we can just view this large-scale language model as a black box. Okay, then we add modules. Yeah, to change the behavior of this model by, for example, by changing the input of these large language models using prompting. Everyone is doing that. And then change the output of these models by adding some task-specific decoders, or even change the data flow of these models with residual connections, such as Aurora. Okay, that's three, at a very high level, 3 different ways to change the model behaviors. Here is the generic architecture of the self-improving AI. We haven't implemented that yet, but it's a reference architecture. It has several components. First of all, is the so-called skill inventory. It contains a set of large-scale language models and the plug-and-play modules that are reusable and composable. Then we have the external knowledge. Here, external knowledge includes public knowledge on web and the task-specific database. For example, the repository, including the repository of AI programs and user logs, which can be used for self-improving. Then the model also, the system has a policy in the middle. The policy takes user input and decides how to respond by generating an action. The action, in some sense, is
someone raised the hand. Maybe you can just let him ask question. Make this more interactive.
If you have any questions, you can just raise your hand. I cannot see hands raised.
Are you able to, Hong? Are you able to really ask the question, or this was a mistake? Just raise a hand by mistake. That's fine. Keep going, please. Sorry about that.
Okay. Then the action executor should simply execute this action by running the AI program. And then we also have the utility function. This function evaluates the action and provide feedbacks. And finally, the working memory stores system state and session context. Okay. So here I'll give you just 2 quick examples to show how this system might work. The first example is the AI copilot for web search. And you can view this a prototype of Bing Chat. Okay. Here the policy actually, policy uses there are several components. I want to point out the utility function. Utility function actually is exactly what Vent mentioned in his part of the talk. He said, okay, we have the language model to generate a response, but ideally we will have another language model work as a judge. That's the utility. That model will say, oh, what you said, the model said, is reasonable or not, or you manipulating facts, you should change your behavior. So that's the utility function. Many times the utility function is task specific, because for some tasks, hallucination is good, for other tasks, hallucination is bad. So the utility function is task specific. The policy decides how the model can give the response. For example, in many cases, the model can just give response directly, but in other cases, it's better to feed the model with additional information. For example, the information retrieved from the web, so that the model can generate a response grounded in external knowledge, not just the knowledge stored in the model parameters. Here's an example how it works, right? Given a user query regarding 2013 Los Angeles Glacier player transfer, the system first consolidated evidence from external knowledge, right? I retrieve news articles, retrieve some raw materials from Wikipedia documents, and then the link module will link this raw evidence with related context, such as the information of the entity, what is indicating what 2013 Los Angeles Galaxy is. And the chain module performs reasoning to form an evidence chain. Right? With all this consolidated knowledge ready, then we feed this knowledge into the larger scale language model, in this case, it's ChatGPT, to generate the response grounded in this knowledge, not just the model parameters. Okay. Then we have this utility function to check the generated results. For example, the utility function will provide this feedback. The feedback says, oh, something is wrong. Then given this feedback, the language model will adjust its behavior and try to generate the second time a revised response. Here's the revised candidate response. This time, the utility function says, oh, the response looks reasonable. So go ahead and send it to the user. Let's jump. So see that we actually add two things to change a behavior model. First of all, we add some external knowledge to allow model to generate a response grounded in actual knowledge. Second is we add a judge, which is implemented as a utility function to check the response, the truthfulness of the response, and also give feedback. That's one example. It showed pretty good results. It reduced the hallucination significantly without sacrificing any richness of the response. And the second example I just want to show here is the image generation model. It's a stable diffusion model. Stable diffusion model actually is a pixel-based model. So you can build a dialogue system around these models by saying that, okay, please remove the goal with red bag. Now the model sort of made some mistake because it removes the red bag instead of the goal. Here, if you ask the model to change the grass to sand, you really change the grass to sand, but also remove the horse. Remove the horse. Here, you ask the model to turn the curtain to pink. It turns curtain to pink, but also turns the sofa to pink. So what's wrong with these models? Because these models are developed purely based on image text pairs, where it views image, just a bunch of pixels, without the concept of objects. So what we do is that we can add a plug and play module to introduce the concept of objects. So the image became a collection of objects instead of a collection of pixels. Now you issue the same query. This time, the output is exactly what you want. So I'm showing this example to demonstrate that you don't need to change the model parameters at all. All you need to do is plug in a module. The module tells the model what are the objects, how to manipulate it at object level, but not just at the pixel level. That works pretty well. I think these are sort of examples I want to show here. The takeaway message is there's still a long way to go. Okay? We have these larger scale language models, but in order to build applications for mission critical tasks, we need to augment these models significantly to make sure they produce the result we desire. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gao. This is great. Now we have really world-class expert from Vietnam, Dr. Han. He has worked in many US companies, including OpenAI, etc. So we'll pass the microphone back to Dr. Han.
All right. So first of all, thank you, honor and privilege to be part of this panelist. Really excited to see how technology in large language model and generative AI has really made so much progress and breakthrough just over a very short period of time. And it's my honor to be here. And I'm going to share with you some of the thoughts that we have at VinAI on a topic of what we call low resource large language models. So I'm going to start by first just presenting, I think, what is actually now a common knowledge. We all know that ChatGPT took the world by storm just within the last half a year or so. The statistics show that it took ChatGPT only 2 months to reach 100 million audience all over the world. And it's actually a world record in terms of the adoption rates. Now, the technology has moved so fast that some of us actually, forgot how long technology usually take in order to spread around the world. And the picture on the left-hand side is my intention to show how things usually work traditionally. So it took cell phones, electricity, and recently the internet, decades, if not century, for it to actually spread all across the world. And here, for the first time in history, we have a technology that all of a sudden becomes so popular, and just about everybody on Earth is actually talking about it. So this is great, and it's also a testament to the potential of this technology in ChatGPT and large language model. How it actually has the potential to reshape the society that we live in. So let me then pause and give everybody some food for thought. If ChatGPT is taking the world by storm, is it actually ready for the world? And if you look at these questions, then very quickly, you'll be able to conclude that, well, unfortunately, ChatGPT is not yet ready for the world. One of the main reasons is that large language models like ChatGPT and all the latest in language technology, it was always mainly trained for English. And then it spreads to other languages, but mostly it spreads to the language where there's commercial relevance. So the consequence of that is that for many languages, and I will show you some statistics later, for many languages, Vietnamese including, there's a lack of high quality pre-trained large language models. There's a lack of high quality, publicly available text corpora. And in general, there's insufficient investment in terms of both expertise and time. And this basically lead us to a situation where so many people in the world want to play with technology like ChatGPT and large language models, but the level of support that this technology for their languages is not up to the quality that we expect to have for first world language like English. So let me jump to a couple of examples here, and I apologize that a lot of these examples is actually taken in Vietnamese. Is actually our intention to do so to illustrate the point that if you try ChatGPT for non-mainstream languages, and Vietnamese is an example, then you start to see a lot of the shortcomings for LLMs to actually get amplified. And you see the performance relative to language like English is still sorry lacking. So some of the previous speakers on the panels have talked about hallucination. And this is by nature the way large language model is trained. There's an active research community is trying to figure out how to deal with this. But let me try to also emphasize that when you try to use ChatGPT for non-mainstream languages like Vietnamese, and due to the limited training data, hallucination becomes even more severe, actually much more severe. So the first example, we asked ChatGPT to summarize a novel called Tatland, which is a really popular novel in Vietnamese literature. Just about every Vietnamese have learned and have heard about this. It's kind of a, in the folklore of the Vietnamese culture. And everybody knows the main character of this novel referred to as Chị Dậu. It's just something that's really popular in the Vietnamese culture. Yet when you ask ChatGPT to summarize this novel, it's doing the right thing in the sense that they figure out who's the novelist, but it hallucinates the name of the main character. And you can see that this is completely unacceptable for anyone who knows about Vietnam or also knows about Vietnamese culture. The second example that I'm highlighting here, again, following the trend of, what if we ask ChatGPT some questions about really popular cultural topics, things that almost every Vietnamese would know about. The second question asks ChatGPT, which year did Trịnh Công Sơn compose the song Youth Guitar? Now, Trịnh Công Sơn is of course is sort of like a very, very well-known figure in this musical scene in Vietnam, compared to be the Bob Dylan of Vietnamese music. And also everybody knows that he never composed the song called Youth Guitar. It's actually composed by a different composer much later. So here, when you asked ChatGPT this question, again, ChatGPT figuring out that, okay, I need to answer this question. And so it starts to fill out the blank. It starts to completely hallucinate about the fact that, yes, Trịnh Công Sơn, the famous composer, did compose this song in 1958. Obviously, that was completely wrong, and so on. Now, I think to the non-Vietnamese audience, I want to kind of say that these are the two facts that almost everyone in Vietnam knows about these facts, and yet GPT-4 completely fail in answering these really simple questions. And once it starts failing to answer this question, it starts to hallucinate, which actually makes the answers even more problematic. Okay, so that example leads us to the following thoughts that, well, now that ChatGPT is so popular in the world, but if you look at the distribution of language spoken by people all around the world, and we also identify at least 22 countries with at least 50 million native speakers that belong to the so-called low-resource language category. And I'm going to speak about what we mean by low resource later. But in general, low resource means these are non-mainstream languages in terms of commercial relevance, and therefore there's not enough investment in terms of expertise and time in how to deal with these languages. But yet, more than 50% of the people in the world speak these languages. So why all of the people speaking these languages want to try out ChatGPT, yet we are left with a situation where technology like ChatGPT is not ready for them. So the idea about low resource large language models is as follows. First of all, how can you build large language models that still possess the emergent abilities that is such interesting and such a breakthrough example in terms of technology in the latest of AI language technology. So how you actually have large language models that still possess these emergent abilities, generalize so well, you can do in-context learning, it can follow instruction, e.g. prompting, and you can also do step-by-step reasoning. But how do you do so, yet remains computationally efficient? And this is really important because what you find in countries like Vietnam is that the cost of GPUs and the cost of hardware that's required to train and serve this large language model is still quite prohibitively expensive. And so if you could actually make these LLMs computationally efficient, is going to lower the barrier of entrance and therefore allow for the LLMs for this kind of language to be built and to be experimented with and to be developed for these low resource languages. If you can actually do that, then it's going to enable a huge new market because as I've alluded to, these languages are spoken by more than half the people in the world. Even if you normalize in terms of GDP output, it's still 40% of the GDP in the world. And of course, once you can actually bring in the expertise and the know-how, especially the people who's very familiar with the culture and the languages, then it's actually easier to build LLMs for this culture and country-specific purpose that is responsible and trustworthy. So, so here's an example that what we tried to see how it actually builds Vietnamese-specific LLM. Again, what we did is that again we're building on open source large language models. But we're going to have to do a lot of fine-tuning, add a lot of data, retraining them, and also do the fine-tuning so that you'll be able to follow instructions and so on. So that's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. But in general, if you can actually do this, then you'll be able to fix some of the really big issues in a model like ChatGPT, where it is simply lacking. The reason is the lacking of region-specific and country-specific training data. An example here that we try to ask GPT to figure out how to give the recipe for a particular for a particular dish that's actually very special to the southern region of Vietnam. And ChatGPT proceeds to give sort of like a reasonably looking recipe, but except that it forgot that this dish involves duck, which is like a key ingredient of this dish. Once you supply it with the right kind of data, then you can actually turn these large language models into something that's a lot more aware of the culture and also the region that we live in. So this is the result. If after fine-tuning a large language model and fixing it, then you'll be able to get the correct instruction of how to cook this dish. Okay, so Now, I think as earlier I alluded to that, in order to work on large language models, which is the really frontier of AI at the moment, it does require a certain level of investment in terms of both expertise and time. VinAI was a young company. It was founded a little bit just 4 years ago. But right from the beginning, one of the missions that we adopted is to democratize AI research and development, and to bring about the benefit and accessibility of AI technology to everyone, regardless of their geography. And just over the last 4 years, we're very proud that we managed to bring together a really strong research team. The research team have published more than 100 papers in all the top AI machine learning conferences, the usual of NeurIPS, ICML, ICLEAR, and so on. And in particular, more than 30 papers of them came from the top LNP conferences venues like ACL, NACO, EMLNP, and so on. We've also released 3 pre-trained large language models for Vietnamese with SOTA performance, and these models received more than 300,000 downloads just in January, early January this year. We have a SOTA Vietnamese English translation system, pre-trained for a large number of Vietnamese English pairs. We also released a large number of large data sets for Vietnamese LNP, and also a state-of-the-art LNP toolkits for Vietnamese as well. So all of this was done as an investment prior to the arrival of the popularity of large language models, and it's actually give us a unique position in order to really investigate the underlying technology in LLM and be able to contribute to how we actually be able to develop this technology for Vietnamese and also other low resource languages in the future. So I'm going to just stop and conclude by again re-emphasizing that unfortunately LLM technologies are not yet ready for more than half the world population, and low resource languages will be one of the keys to democratize large language model technologies to the whole world. And Vietnamese is actually a great test domain for low resource LLM. Being a small AI company in Vietnam, we love to see that the big tech companies can actually pay more attention to the non-mainstream languages. So that's it. Thank you so much. And I see that someone's already tried to ask some questions.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hưng Hải Bui, and thank you so much to our panelists for your insightful sharing. Well, back to our webinar, I would like to invite back our 4 panelists for a short panel reflection of only 5 minutes. And after the panel reflection, the VinFuture Prize has a special announcement to come, so stay tuned for our audience for what's to come ahead. Now, may I please have our 4 panelists back to the monitor?
So it's Vint. I wonder if I could jump in for just a second with 2 observations. The first one is that I think we understand that the large language models have the potential to be applied in a variety of ways, some of which might be very risky. For example, giving you medical advice for treatment or evaluation of a medical condition, and other things might be far less risky. For example, just entertainment, please write me a story about something. And I wonder whether we would benefit from trying to sort through the various applications and say something about risk level, and then say something about the kind of testing and validation and verification and protection that we would want to apply to these various models, depending on what they were being used for. So that's a kind of a risk analysis that I would ask the panelists to respond to. And then the second thing I think is that we know that these large language models trade in text, and they can interact with things that use text as either input or output, which says that when you start talking about the plug and play add-ons that were mentioned earlier, You could imagine a large language model being used to control something that accepts control in the form of text. Well, that should raise some concern for people depending on what text interaction the model is engaging in. Is it engaging in financial transactions? Is it engaging in medical diagnosis? Is it engaging in some other system that can be controlled and affect the real world? Those should, I think, raise our concerns for safety in the use of these systems. Thank you for letting me intervene.
Yeah, maybe Jianfeng can help to answer your question. Ming?
Okay, I will try. I don't think I have the complete answer. First of all, I think it's the expectation. We need to set up a right expectation for all the users, because these models can generate very fluent response. It looks like the model knows everything, but the truth is no, the model does not know everything. So it's very important when the model generates response, especially if the response can be used in some mission critical task, set up a right expectation. This is just the suggestion, and take the suggestion with your own risk. Just like, you know, I'm not a doctor, but I know something about. So when I discuss you know, treatment with my wife, I give some suggestion, but my wife knows that my suggestion needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But it's the same thing for the language model. Okay? The second is that we have a lot of traditional ways to make sure that the machine learning model produce safe result. So the ideal case is that we need to use such model as a sort of verification for the more advanced model. Although, for example, the model will say a lot of things, but probably 20% of the things that model said can also be created by more traditional machine learning models. Then we just check the quality of this, check the correctness of this 20%. This actually is the underlying idea we develop, based on which we develop this utility function. So we cannot check everything, but we check what we know. And if we found there's some mistakes, we point out these mistakes. Then hopefully the model can make mistakes. I think it's a in a large sense, it's a revolution. But in practice, we need to do it incrementally, step by step, so that people can get used to it. The industry will get used to it. We know exactly how to move forward without taking the risks that we cannot handle. Okay, quick answer.
Yeah, those are good points. Let me just add my observation. As I said in the introduction, the large language model, the power of generative language model is nothing more than just to translate whatever you have, the prompt, the history, into the answer you have. Mm-hmm. And it's based on this massive compression, you know, the compression, yeah, knowledge compression of the whole web index, right? And the whole web got, different opinions and opposite, disagreements. Therefore, when you generate something that's sensitive, the hallucination is part of the answer, because it really doesn't know what to do when you compress everything into this massive transformer, large language model. It is the translation of the history into whatever answer you want to have. And just, the hallucination problem is not fixable. So no. Jianfeng proposed a number of things, and Han mentioned some of the issues of no resource languages. That's just the reflection of the current approach. It's just, a translation system to translate history into the future. What do you expect? Because the low resource language by design, you don't have a lot of data in the training pool, right? Therefore, the hallucination problem is far more serious than the high resource language. So one of the solutions, like what Jianfeng proposed, in my opinion, is a very good one, is it's a federated system. Essentially, you want to have this massive large language model and the specialized expert working together like a federated system to cohesively solve the problem that is domain specific. There are many ways to really orchestrate that approach, whether you fine tune, you design a prompt, or you create a specialized model that got a deep knowledge, but doesn't have the horizontal coverage. That is the future of what I think that is going to happen, whether it's, going to use the search result to guardrail the correctness, or you want to have a better knowledge that is fresh, that's not available in the older large language model, or you want to really adapt for low resource languages. They're all in the same spirit to create a federated system. LoRa is basically another model working side by side with the large language model itself. Like Microsoft Translator, they demonstrated if you combine Microsoft Translation, which is much smaller, much better on the low resource languages, with the GPT-4, which is actually very good, and the document level translation for the high resource languages, then you get the best of both worlds, both on the cost and the quality. So there are just many examples. This federated approach is one way to solve the problem that demonstrated in the large language model, whether it's BARD or ChatGPT or C code plus, whatever they all have their own strength, but the ability for us to bring them together in an inclusive way is going to really make a difference. Tom, what do you think? You have the last word.
So that's, I think, federation is a very interesting idea, and I can see that it can also be a way to incorporate the development into low resource languages, LLM as well. So I think that's a great idea, but I think in general, I think we should give the large language model the ability to say, I don't know, right? As a last resort, that, it needs to figuring out that, I don't know, maybe the probability for the sequence that it tries to generate is just, I don't know whether it actually threshold the probability of the sequence or not, but in general, yeah, I think the ability to be able to say I don't know is something that requires some thought.
Thank you so much to our panelists for your valuable input. And while we give our speakers a little short cooling break, we have a little short announcement to make. The nominations for the 2023 VinFuture Prize will be closed at 2 p.m. May 15th, and this is according to the Vietnam time. Before the prize moves on to the pre-screening stage, we have one final presentation regarding the 2023 prize. And I would like to introduce to you a member of our secretariat, Dr. Luân Phạm, who will be taking the stage and providing you all with very informative session.
Thanks, Thảo, and thanks to our chair and speaker for the informative knowledge today. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I would like to share my screen, and I hope you can see it right now.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, my name is Luân, and I'm very delighted to represent the Secretariat of the VinFuture Prize to introduce you about VinFuture Foundation, the prize, and the final reminder of the 2023 call for nominations. Our nomination submission portal for this year will end within 4 hours. So let's first learn about our founder, Mr. Phạm Nhật Vượng, founder and the chairman of the Vingroup, the largest private corporation in Vietnam, and his wife, Madame Phạm Thu Hương. VinFuture Foundation is an independent non-profit organization, and we believe in inspiring and empowering scientists and innovators with significant contribution for a better future. Our foundation has the number of activities such as grant making, connecting, partnership, and the VinFuture Prize is the first activity. So what is the VinFuture Prize? VinFuture Prize is the first global science tech prize from Vietnam and is one of the world's largest annual prize in science and technology. Our mission is to create meaningful change in the everyday life of millions of people by promoting breakthrough scientific research and technological innovation. We achieved that through 4 annual prizes ranging from 3 million USD for a grand prize to 500,000 USD for 3 special prizes for innovators from developing countries, female innovators, and innovators in emerging fields. I would like also want to emphasize that while the grand prize rewards proven impact works and the special prize focus on the potential impact innovations. And here our distinguished member of the VinFuture Prize Council and pre-screening committee, they are responsible for the selection process of VinFuture laureates. And here are the picture of our previous laureates in 2021 and in 2022. We are so proud to have celebrated their achievement and to have contributed to their continued success. At the VinFuture Prize call for nomination for the 2023, we are excited to once again recognize and reward exceptional individuals. We would like to invite you to join us by nominating outstanding minds towards a more equitable and sustainable future for all. The call will be closed at 2 p.m. Vietnam time today. So after the evaluation process, the winners will be announced at the VinFuture Prize Awards ceremony in December. Any nominations submitted after today will be considered for the next year, 2024. If you have the knowledge of exceptional innovations, we encourage you to visit our website and nominate them by completing the nomination form. The form is divided into 6 sections on the screen. In addition to the nomination form, we also require supporting documentation. There are 4 most important components: CV of nominees, endorsement letters, at least 1 is required, and more letters are encouraged. Valid intellectual properties, and you may also provide additional forms of nominees to help better evaluate the main contributors of the innovation. In the bottom of the area of our online nomination portal, you can find detailed guidelines and templates to guide you through the nomination process. Before I conclude my presentation, I would like to share some pictures from the last December VinFuture Prize Awards ceremony and the following cited with events in Hanoi, Vietnam, the conversation with the Prize Council and the pre-screening committee, Inspirational Talk Series, Science for Life Symposium, the dialogue with the VinFuture Prize Laureates 2022. Thank you for your attention. Before coming back to our Q&A session of ChatGPT and beyond, we hope this call for nomination has provided an informative information and have guided you through the nomination process. Your support is crucial to the success of the VinFuture Foundation, and we eagerly await for our outstanding nomination for the VinFuture Prize. Together, let's create a better future for all. Thao, over to you.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Luân Phạm for your insightful sharing. We urge you to submit your nominations and join us in recognizing scientific breakthroughs and research that are driving progress to the world. Now, moving forward, we are excited to open the floor for the Q&A session where you are allowed to send in your questions in the chat box and encouraged to raise your hand in the Zoom function. Now, we actually already received a signal from a member in the audience, Dr. Lê Anh Tú, who will be sending the questions directly to our panelists. Dr. Lê Anh Tú, are you ready to send in your questions?
Thanks very much for the sharing. So as introduced, my name is Anh Tú. I'm a director at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Vietnam and PwC. I am very, very excited about this whole technology called generative AI, and with the introduction of ChatGPT. And myself, I have also tried out, various generative AI, for example, Bot from Google, Bing from Microsoft, and ChatGPT as well as GPT-4. And I'm quite amazed with the intelligence and also the ability to produce answers to our natural language prompts. With Dr. Jan Fen Gao and Dr. Su Dong Huang available here, I'm also share my excitement about what Microsoft announced as the co-pilot through their Microsoft 365 Office, right, and software, where it has transformed all what we think about productivity and what it can change in the workplace. And that's quite excited to see what will come in the near future. The recent reports that I've read, ChatGPT or generative AI in general may replace up to 300 million of full-time jobs in various professions over the next few years. That is quite significant, and I think, and I do believe it is a trend coming, and we as humans in various professions, we should prepare ourselves for that trend. I do share and I agree with Dr. Hung Bui that AI, and also Dr. Vincent, who also reiterated on the fact that AI is not perfect, but I think so is our human, our human being, right? We are not perfect either. So AI can make mistakes in their answers, and so can we. So what I do see is the ability to process the large amount of information from the generative AI that surely human cannot beat and cannot compare. And the time that it takes to generate these answers, we cannot compare. I also agree with Dr. Hung that right now in the Vietnamese context, we don't see that the ChatGPT is able to produce all correct answers yet, but we also have to accept the reality that Vietnamese people have not interacted with this technology sufficiently enough to train the LLM and also to train the generative AI so that it can, do better and answer more correct answers. I think the gift that human beings have is the ability to learn, the ability to correct our mistakes, and also to improve ourselves. And I'm quite excited to see that generative AI or AI in general is able to do exactly the same with GPT-4, right? It can have a reflection where it generates one answer for us. We ask it to reflect on its answers, and it's able to relook at the answer and give a better, more correct answers. So I think my question is really on, so I appreciate all the sharing on the technical aspect of generative AI, what it can do, but I think more about the implications of this technology in the foreseeable future is what a lot of us are interested to know. So just reflect on my experience. For example, I spent months to write my 300 pages of PhD thesis, whereas now we can see that GPT-4 can, within minutes can generate at least the, literature review part very quickly. So given that GPT-4 can pass a number of difficult exams and advanced exams, in my opinion. So I do think that we have to relook at our education system, schools, university, degree programs, or education in general, how they should be reshaped. So what do you see as the education in the coming years, right? Given that ChatGPT or GPT, generative AI in general, can pass and can help us to do a lot of exams. So how schools, universities, degrees should change themselves to adopt to that trend? That's the first question. The second question is, we agree that generative AI can do a lot better than humans, but what are the areas that you still see in the foreseeable future that generative AI or AI in general cannot be able to do better than humans. So some of the areas I can see, for example, building the human relationships, interacting with people and solving conflicts. So that's probably something that it might take AI a long way to be able to compete with human beings. And my very last question is, how do you see the world dominated with AI in the next 20 years? What do we see as the different world that we'll be living in? Thank you very much.
You have a lot of questions, and I would say for the first one, I think Vint is probably the best person to answer. He has seen a lot of changes, especially on education. He is really the word expert. And Vint, are you able to really answer the first question for us?
So, well, you should take my answers, as was said earlier, with a grain of salt. But with regard to education in particular, I would say that we should apply the show your work theory. When you're asking students to answer mathematical questions, you don't want just the answer. You want them to show you how they got to the answer, what was their reasoning. And I think this might be a very important thing to insist on, is to get students who might be using these large language models in the course of responding to exams, but you want them to explain how they got to the solution as opposed to simply asserting what the answer is. I guess that when it comes to writing software, we would also want very much to find tools that will help us uncover mistakes. This is a little bit like the generative adversarial concept, where you have two large neural networks, one of which is trying to fool the other. In this case, we might want a large language network or some kind of a neural network to look for mistakes in the software that we were using a large language model to generate.
Yeah, I want to just add for the education, especially in Asia, they took the exam very seriously. What college you can go to is based on one exam. Given the fact that nobody can outperform GPT in terms of scoring on the exam, really is the harder question we have to ask ourselves. How can we transform the current education practice in Asia? In the US, at least, whether you can be admitted to a top college depends on more than just one exam, right? Is your GPA, your SAT, your activity, your leadership. This is actually really holistic combination. This is really a huge question for the society. I don't think any of us got an answer, right? This is really just something we have to learn and discuss, debate on how we can move forward. So on the second question, I guess, Jianfeng, you can probably help to answer.
If you look at the history, right, and this is not new things. Every time we see a new technology, and then these machines can do much better than humans on certain things. When I use a very stupid example. So you see in the road, all these cars are running much faster than human, right? It happens all the time, so it's not a surprise. This new change also brings new opportunities, and people will be, will always move on. We're going to focus on something more creative, more thoughtful. So think about in old days, people work really hard just to feed ourselves. Right now, we work really hard to memorize all these facts in order to get a good score in exams, so we can go to the university we like. Now, these things are behind us with the new technology. We're going to focus on more things that where we can really enjoy our life. So I don't know. I think you mentioned that you are writing your thesis, right? You spend a lot of time writing 300-page literature review. That's a very boring work. I don't know. You should spend your time with your family watching movies. Why writing such 300 pages literary review? Most of these papers are out of dated anyway. So let GPT do that. So you spend all your time talking, playing with your kids, and teach them how to play with ChatGPT so that in the future they can do much better than ChatGPT. I think that most things we can do. Yeah. So we just need to increase our standard, the life standard. So they say, okay, all days we believe, oh, watching all this close is boring. Now we say, oh, writing this literature review is boring. But, so we move on. Okay, I don't worry that at all. I think this opens up a lot of new opportunities that we can make our life much, much better. And we people are very good at creating a new, better life for ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Jim Fong. Your PhD thesis should just add knowledge for humanity, right? The large language model is repeating whatever is being created, even with hallucination. They are not adding anything. They're just repeating what is being said, what is spoken. Vin?
Just a short observation. Human beings are often very good at taking a small amount of information and forming models of how things work. And it's astonishing how a small amount of information can lead to a model that you can reason with. I don't think the LLMs are nearly as capable as humans are of doing things like that. And I don't quite know whether we're even on a path that would lead to better model building and then reasoning about those models, developing tests to see whether the models match what we would expect in the real world.
They can actually do amazing work on reasoning itself, but it's based on whatever the pattern they have observed. That is the magic power. Transformer can really, really generalize extremely well and can reach human parity on the bar exam, on SAT or AP test. No question about the capability, because the question and all those exams are well framed, very much like an AlphaFold for the goal. So when you have the extremely well established framework and question answering is actually straightforward, reasoning can be done. But for a PhD work, you have to really have groundbreaking human knowledge addition that is not published anywhere. That is, the human's creativity and capability, right? That's what PhD thesis is about. We train PhD in order to really increase the boundary and expand the boundary of a human knowledge.
Thank you so much to our panelists for addressing Dr. Leng Du's question. The next question is actually addressed to our representative from the Vietnamese sci-tech community in AI research, Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi. From a student named Nguyễn Trung Hiếu, please allow me to read this question out loud. From my understanding of a large language model takes a lot of time to train. However, in my experience using ChatGPT, when ChatGPT gives the wrong answer, we can teach ChatGPT another answer right in the session. Does that mean there is a short-term model on top of the long-term model in ChatGPT? And will that teach answer affect the entire model and the answers for others, or does it only affect my ChatGPT service? Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi, can you help us please with this question?
Okay, so thank you so much for a very interesting question. So first of all, I cannot answer questions regarding the specific technology of ChatGPT because that's actually an OpenAI technology. Now I can, however, give some educated guess about how you'll be able to quickly get an LLM that at the moment perhaps doesn't have the piece of knowledge to the point where it has the knowledge to be able to answer the questions that you're trying to ask, right? So the way LLM is built, you first, try to figure out how to build or how to have access to a huge text corpora, and then you trained a language model. Underlying model is actually transformer, as a lot of people these days also recognize as actually. So it's actually one of the foundation model, foundation piece of technology that a lot of people are using, making a huge impact in AI at the moment. But once you pre-train this model, right, then there's other steps about how you'll be able to make it to follow instructions better. That's sort of what we call the fine-tuning stage. And yes, of course, you can actually foresee with the right engineering, you can get the fine-tuning to happen a lot sooner, a lot faster, and even to the point where maybe it's individualized to the particular user. But in general, I think all of this requires a lot of engineering effort, a lot of access to requires a lot, access to huge computing resource and so on. But I think the community is also recognizing that there's a limit to what large model can actually materialize, and to move forward, it's probably not so much about adding a lot more data to the large models and make it, like many more billions of parameters, but it's about how you can actually make the current technology much more computationally efficient, and work smarter, making a smarter choice of how you can achieve the resource, computation resource, and then also data resource and so on.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi for addressing Mr. Nguyễn Trung Hiếu question. And due to time constraint, unfortunately, we are only able to move on with one more question. But please keep in mind that for those interested in asking more, you can definitely send in your questions at our email address, office@vinfutureprize.org, and our panelists for today will be happy to assist you. And this one last question comes from a member of our audience, Mr. Johnny Chen. Addressed to Dr. Huang, what's your view on other products such as Google Bard? Is it disadvantage for ChatGPT for only training model in fixed data set and text versus Google Bard? Is database or model language algorithm more important to create competitive advantage for AI competitors? Dr. Huang, can you please help us with this question? Thank you.
So that's a harder question for me to answer because there's no systematic evaluation of GPT-4 versus Bard. I have used Bard myself. I'm also a vivid user of GPT-4. I like both. They are different strengths and weaknesses. They make different kinds of errors. So I think both need to do a better job moving forward. But I like both. They actually tremendous progress is made from two different sets of researchers and data set. So I'm so happy to see two independent groups of people and the teams. They can approach something really, really impressive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Huang, for addressing our very last question of today's webinar. As we come to an end for today's webinar, we would like to express our deepest gratitude to our chair for the webinar, Dr. Sudong Huang, for your incredible leadership, Dr. Jianfeng Gao and Dr. Vinton Cerf for your incredible presentation on today's topic, and of course, our representative of the Vietnamese sci-tech community in AI research, Dr. Hưng Hải Bùi. And also, we would like to say thank you to our audience for your incredible engagement in the Q&A session. Now, this is such an incredible special webinar. We would like to have this moment captured. So if you could please turn on your cameras, and all of our panelists, and of course, our audience as well, if you could please turn on our camera, we would like to take a photo with you all.
Yeah, also happy Mother's Day. I know it's late, Vint, but it's still Happy Mother's Day. I just want to actually say everyone, Happy Mother's Day.
Okay. All right, we are counting down. Let's all smile brightly. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you all so much. And once again, thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We wish you all a very good day or very good rest of the day ahead. Thank you so much and goodbye.